Well, the history of film industry in Kenya dates back to 1927, when the first movie, the HRH at the capital, was shot by the colonialists. Well, many decades have passed, and this industry has definitely come of age, as you would say. But now it has gotten to a crossroad. Where do we go from here? That's the question. There are many policies that the government is mooting in a bid to help this industry jumpstart, create jobs, as well as help with economic growth. What is the way forward? This week on Inside Government, we're joined by Dr. Ezekiel Mutua. He's the CEO of Kenya Film Classification Board. This will be our discussion plus more. Thank you so very much indeed for finding time to be with us. When you take a casual look at social media sites, Dr. Ezekiel Mutua and Kenya Film Classification Board, there's a lot of bile from social media enthusiasts. Why is this the case? Is it that they have never understood your role as an organization and your role as Dr. Ezekiel Mutua?
Thank you very much, first of all, for coming and to see how well prepared and how organized our national broadcaster is. I think you make us proud. And for me to appear on your segment of Inside Government, let me welcome you to this office and to KFCB. Your question speaks about our role, but also the difference between my official capacity and the individual capacity as a Kenyan. But there's a very thin line between performing public duty, especially in an office like here, where I'm also the spokesperson, the accounting officer, and the CEO, and my personal life. And so sometimes there's a mix-up of issues where some of them that are directed at my person cross to the official line, and I've had to live with it. I've learned to live with it. But essentially, Kenya Film Classification Board is a regulator. And the work of a regulator is not really liked because it's about telling people, hey, there's a mistake here. Hey, you're going offline. Hey, you need to stay on course. It's like the traffic police. The traffic police is not popular because you stop your car and you're in a hurry to get to your destination. Your car is perfect. You have the insurance. You have ensured that it's okay. But there's another guy whose car is not okay. And if all of you are allowed to pass, you may not know what the traffic police officer is doing by stopping some cars. Some of it could be having somebody who was carjacked and they're inside the boot of the car. And you'll never realize the importance of a traffic police officer or a police officer until you're in danger. Our work as a regulator is not to be popular, it's to do what is right. And what is right is not liked by many. No wonder the scripture says, wide is the door that goes to destruction, but narrow is the path. And our work is to keep Kenyan film producers, film makers, and even the consumers of film content on the straight and the narrow, and the reason being that the sector that we regulate is so powerful. Film is such a powerful vehicle. It can make or destroy. It can build, it can destroy societies, particularly the children. And that's why we have this tagline, protecting children from exposure to harmful content. And so every time when you're putting checks and balances, and you're the one raising the red flag, all the time calling people to order, you don't become popular. It takes time. But you've got to get used to that perception where people will think you are a distraction, where people will think you are always spoiling the party. You are always raining on their parade. And they wonder what's wrong with you. Get a life. Why are you always, they don't understand. I always say the kids who insult me on social media, the people troll me, because of them are young. Most of them are young. They would thank me years later when they grow up. They will be so grateful that a guy called Dr. Ezekiel Mutua was the CEO of Kenya Film Classification Board at a time like this, when technology was growing in this country, when young people had access to iPhones and smartphones and the internet, Wi-Fi in public places and sometimes even in their homes and in offices, and they could access everything. And if we never managed to control, at least put a measure of regulation to say this is what should be seen in public places, this is what is good for public exhibition, and also to create a national conversation. Because I think actually where I've been even hated more, or trolled more, or even what do you, insulted, you know, if I was to use it loosely, is in creating a national conversation. Remember, O'Brien, I don't think you can mention 2-3 cases where we ever arrested a filmmaker, other than the case of Aloka, the mzee in Kisumu, who sang and posted a video, and we, later on actually, we realized it was not even deliberate, but it caused an uproar. We are not into the business of arresting people. Yeah. The cases that we have handled, whether you're talking about our dispute with the Kenya breweries, whether you're talking about our dispute with the lesbians and the gays in the homosexual film Rafiki, and the whole case of legalizing, or the attempt to legalize homosexuality in Kenya, we went to court. That's what decent people do. But people don't see it that way. They will personalize. And of course, you know, the idlers and troll people on the media, on social media will troll you for all manner of reasons. Yep. Some of them are angry and they are bitter with their lives. And they project that bitterness on you. They think they are doing badly because you are doing okay. They are poor because you are rich. There's all this thing of Kenyans hating people who appear to be doing well or to be assertive or to be knowing their space. But to bring it back to the context, I think the work of a regulator is not easy. And I think you shouldn't assent to it if you're not ready to take the bash. Because people will bash you. If you're a regulator, if you're a policeman, people will hate you. But you've got to do the right thing. You step on toes because, like I've said, it's a question of keeping people on the straight and narrow, and then enforcing the law. And O'Brien, the framers of the law from the days of Hammurabi, the lawmaker, from the days, the ancient history, the framers of the law come from the point of view that human beings are inherently evil, and they are prone, and they have the propensity to commit crime and to do evil. So the law begins from the point of thou shalt not. And the people who stop you, who now enforce thou shalt not, enforce the law, come from the point of view that you are up to mischief. Naturally. That's what a regulator is.
Tell me things. I mean, you are devout, Christian, and you have just quoted the Bible, several times. But where do you draw the line between your personal belief, the national belief of the country, and your regulatory role as KCB, as KFCB?
I actually believe with all my heart that, first of all, to be able to do anything meaningful in life, whether you are holding a public office, whether you're doing private business, you must be a person of conviction and integrity. And those are personal values. If you don't have those personal values, it becomes even difficult to fit in the defined roles that are in the terms of reference. So I first come with this, as I am, with my values. And because I applied for the job and I said who I am. So yes, I have been a Christian for the longest. I've been a Christian Union leader throughout my school life. But when it comes to holding a public office, it is not the Bible that I use to rate films, to say this is not suitable for this. It is the law. But the personal conviction and the values help me to make sound decisions that I'm also comfortable with, and help me also to stay, to preach what I'm doing water, and ensure that also through my own personal example of leadership, others can say, we may not agree with him, but he's not a corrupt person. We may not agree with him, but he's not double speak. And I think personal values are very critical. In my view, the bane of our country is actually the deficit of integrity in public leadership. There's a deficit of leadership in so many levels, not just in public life, but from the parental space to the corporates, to the religious institutions, to schools. There is a dearth of leadership. There's a problem. Leadership is a problem. And where it's a problem is because leaders preach water and drink wine. They don't have integrity. And how do you become a person of integrity if you have nothing that you hold to be your values, personal values? And so I don't think, in my view, rather than bash someone who has some inclination towards faith, because the whole issue about faith actually is about being accountable to somebody or to an institution higher than you. Faith is actually more critical than the law for me, because it helps me to try and do the right thing even when nobody's watching. And I think for me it's a plus rather than become a distraction to my duties.
But in a country whereby, the Constitution guarantees, the freedom of speech, of course, within a certain context of the law. For people who do not confess to the same religion that you do, they have the social media space, they have television space, where they can come and espouse their beliefs. In a situation like this, I mean, where do you step in?
First of all, let's make it clear that the guiding document is the law. That Kenya Film Classification Board is established under the Films and Stage Plays Act Cap 222. And there are other laws that donate powers like KICA, Kenya Information Communications Act, on the watershed and the rating of content. We also have donated mandate in the programming code and so on and so forth. But we have a law, and we have the Constitution of Kenya that also recognizes freedom of expression, freedom of the media, access to information, and so on. So those are the guiding documents. I'm just saying that it's not everything that is in the law. When you're in leadership, it is actually more about sound judgment in the wider good, and then using the law now to actualize your goal, than the other way around. If you only stuck to the law and use the public good and the wider good, as the complementary. For me, it is actually the wider good, because I believe Kenyans go to elections every 5 years, elect a government, put it in power, they make laws, and those laws are the ones that I'm given to enforce. If there was a problem first, it wouldn't be the problem with me, because it would be the problem of the law done by Kenyan members of parliament and representatives of the people. And so there's a sense in which then what you have quoted, the Constitution and the law, become the safety net for the people that we are supposed to serve, or we serve, in the sense that Okiya Mutata can go to court and challenge even a cabinet secretary, even the president, and say the decisions of the president, the decision of the cabinet secretary are unconstitutional, and you will go to court and you will get judgment, sometimes against even the government of the day. So there is no worry about a public official like me applying their faith against the Constitution or against the law, because even an ordinary Kenyan will go to court and get their rights, and they will the court will quash such decisions. To the extent of the inconsistent with the Constitution, they become null and void. So it's not even a debate that somebody can apply their faith and use it to violate the rights of other people, or even to force things down the throats of people. That's a conversation that is brought in by people who want actually to twist the narrative so that it looks like it is not the law you're applying. Like I've told you, when I came here, we banned some beer adverts. I wrote demand letters. That's a legal process. And the people we were asking to remove the adverts from the watershed period, remember, we told them very clearly, beer is not illegal in Kenya. It is, beer companies are corporate entities. In fact, they pay a lot of taxes. The issue is there is a law that demands that if you're going to air adverts that are related to content or products that are for adults, then you do it outside the watershed, 10 o'clock, and we have no problem with that. They do it now. So when they wrote back and contested, we went to court. And for 6 months we were in court, and we won. When we won, they removed the adverts from the watershed period.
If you were to be asked, I mean, is Kenya Film, KFCB, a moral police board or a censorship board? What would you say?
It is actually neither. KFCB is Kenya Film Classification. Before, it used to be Kenya Film Censorship Board. And there are still boards that go by censorship. Our counterparts in Nigeria, who regulate Nollywood, they are called National Film and Video Censorship Board. And they do a good job, and they have not undermined the growth of the film industry in Nigeria. In fact, Nollywood is the fastest growing film industry in the continent, all right? So it's not even about the censorship, but we said after the Constitution of Kenya 2010 that Kenya is a very liberal country. Our approach to these issues is not to control, but to regulate. And so our work principally is to classify and rate films for public consumption. We don't interfere with the private, what you're doing in your house, what you're doing in your private parties, unless there are children admitted to those parties. And so we are like an advisory board, okay, really, to say suitable for this age, not suitable for the other. Our only problem comes in when you say you show a program on TV, for example, and you say this is suitable for general exhibition, but then we see classifiable elements that are not suitable for watershed, like nudity, obscenity, foul language, violence, horror, occultism, and so on. Those are the classifiable elements that we look at. And we do it in a very scientific way, O'Brien. We don't just sit here and pronounce, the Bible says thou shalt not. No. It is so scientific. I wish you can go for us, or what they call a censor. They still use that word. We have a classification department. This is what they do. We always give an odd number of film examiners. They go and sit with guidelines, the classification guidelines, and they watch a film together, all of them. And you rate, you give it to your rating, I give it my rating, someone else, and we aggregate. It is the majority number of what they think it was that carried the day. And when they are doing that, they are rating, they consider the frequency and the intensity and context of classifiable elements. And I mentioned them: obscenity, foul language, nudity, horror, violence, drugs, occultism, those things that you don't want to expose to children, or if you expose, there must be a context. There can be spilling of blood, but if you are going to allow somebody to chop another person's hand and you see it falling down and blood spilling, I don't think that's appropriate for a child. Even he'll watch and you are like, no, okay? But if somebody was just pricked, or they showed the missile coming, but we didn't see the person's head being smashed and brains, splattering everywhere, we can say the context. It was about to show how there was a bomb attack or something. We want to so the intensity and frequency. It's so scientific. So it's not about moralistic censorship or dictatorship or control. In fact, I always say, it bothers me when I see people sounding like we control, because we don't. No, we regulate, we rate and classify, general exhibition, parental guidance, not suitable for 16, not suitable for this. And that is in the law and in the classification guidelines. Remember the process of lawmaking, and you mentioned policies that have been there. You mentioned in your introduction how the film industry in this country has come of age. And now the conversation is actually not even more about regulation, but about creating jobs, spurring growth.
But is it possible then, to ensure that, the moral values, of a nation like Kenya, is upheld in a country whereby you have more than 27 million people on social media sites, in a country where you have more than 35 radio stations, more than 25 TV stations, and you have thousands and thousands of filmmakers and producers, every day scoring the ground, to produce content. How do you do this as an entity?
We do not have to rate every single film. And that's why we're talking about creating a national conversation, empowering the children themselves to know what can be harmful to them, so that when they're accessing this, because we don't want to deny them the access to technology. We don't actually advocate the fact that a parent should not buy gadgets for their kids. No, Kenya is such a globalized, technology-savvy country where our youth are so innovative and so creative that we created M-Pesa. And I think the guy who first came with that idea is a young man. And so we want our kids to access technology, to have the smartphones, to be able to navigate. However, we are aware about the magnitude of the job, that you cannot police every home, every child, and every content that is being accessed, because it's massive. And the spectrum was expanded in 2015. Remember, when I came here, there were about 5 major TV stations. Now they are going to 100, and majority of them on digital media. Now pay-to-view TVs are more. Netflix started streaming in Kenya 2017 or thereabout, or was it 2016? 2016, and this massive content on Netflix. So you can't ask Netflix to submit every program or every film. But when you create the policy and you create a conversation, you empower people with information, but also you create the framework And say, for instance, in the case of Netflix and other over-the-top services, is that we are not asking to rate. It's not possible, practically possible to rate every film on Netflix. But we are saying, if you bring it rated for 13, we want it to be the 13 of Kenya. So the classifiable elements that I spoke about must be conforming to the 16 of Kenya. Because you may find what is rated 13 in America could have very bad language.
So why are people now talking about rating of films and programs right now? I mean, this institution has been there for so many years. Why are we having this conversation now?
Like I've said, there's a sense in which I was thrown into the deep waters, and the conversation then gravitated around me, but it was more about the timing. That I came from the Ministry of Information, of ICT, where I was the Information Secretary, and 2015, when this job was advertised, I came here at a time when we had just completed digital migration, and where I saw that we were going now to have an expanded spectrum. But also being a journalist, having practiced with the nation, I was Secretary General of KUJ, I was Director of Information. I also came from a background where I understand the power of the media to make or to break. So there's a sense in which I would say I was the man of the moment. I could have been a victim of history and circumstances, but I came here when digital migration had just happened. And remember, I was right at the center of digital migration as Secretary of Information in the Ministry of ICT. So the things that we used to say in the boardroom that would happen is what I came to prevent. And so when I came, it was like the industry takes KFCB as just another, you are run-off-the-mill regulator there to apeleke to, films to go and lie. They were not quite keen on what is the philosophy behind regulation. And that's where I started here with my colleagues. I asked them, why do you think we exist? We exist to rate films and broadcast content. In fact, that time there was even a discussion as to whether broadcast content was our purview. And people were pushing it to the cinema theaters. When I came here in 2015, we even CSA'd TV programs and adverts. That's not the work of KFCB. I said, but the definition of film in the law, and this is the beauty with going to school and having experience and knowing the terrain, because I was ahead of them. Because that argument came here very strongly. Even the ministers, we were in different ministries then, and there is fundamental differences with very senior people who were saying, but I thought CA regulates the broadcasters. They license them. The only body that in Kenya that can determine suitability or lack thereof of content is Kenya Film Classification Board. And the definition of film in the law is anything audiovisual, whether it is 1 second or 5 hours. So I came with that knowledge. And I've done some bit of schooling. I've gone to school well and for a long time in the same area. My master's and my PhD are in communication studies. So I was not coming from the streets. I came with a mission. So I asked my colleagues, why do you think we exist? We don't just rate. That's the easiest of the job. We exist because to rate films and broadcast content to ensure that they conform to Kenya's culture, values, and national aspirations. Get that. Number 2, to protect children from exposure to harmful content.
In the interest of time, I know there is, the film policy that is, under consideration.
Yes.
That proposes, several changes, into how the film industry is managed and how it's regulated. But where do you see this industry going from where we are?
I think Kenya is at the crossroad. We can now tap into the potential of the film industry or lose it to our neighbors. We have the strength of having technology. We are the hub of ICT. We have the greatest internet penetration in this country that more than any of our neighbors. We have very creative youth, very innovative, very tech savvy. So we have the potential to get this industry to the next level, because the key drivers, and there's a book I want to recommend to you, O'Brien, written by Thomas Friedman, called The World is Flat, where he predicted the flatteners that will dominate the world, and the philosophy and ideals that will shape where the future of the world will be post or in the fourth revolution, which is where we are now.
Thomas Friedman, the economist and
yes, yeah, the New York columnist. Now, look, it was predicted that Kenya would be within the third revolution. We lost out big time because of the political environment, because you've got to create the right environment. But as the fourth revolution was coming, we were all set. Kenya was right there at the pedestal. And so our youth have really taken up into technology. They have taken into innovation. And we can use now innovation to drive film creation, distribution, broadcasting, exhibition, and even possession and how we share. Okay? And that's the focus we need to give our people, to see film as business. Where I'm now pushing the conversation is towards professionalizing this industry. And thankfully, what CS Musheru is doing with now the film bill and the film policy is actually capturing that, but also creating a very distinct mandate, but harmonized between film development and film regulation. In fact, now we are going to have one law. If things go the way the CS has proposed through the task force, we are going to have one law that establishes the developer and the regulator. Good. Okay? That will help because we will speak with one voice. We will harmonize our thinking, we'll align our thinking, so that what the developer is doing is also supported by the regulator, and vice versa. Because you don't want just to develop by having many films that defile your culture, that go against your values and ethos and destroy your children. You want to balance between the job creation but also values, because that's critical. So the regulator will have a distinct role, and the developer, but they will be harmonized under one act, under one ministry.
Good. Thank you so very much indeed for your time and, of course, your insight.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Appreciated. Dr. Ezekiel Mutua is the CEO of Kenya Film and Classification Board, joining us this week on Inside Government to enumerate to us what the board is doing to help in the growth of the industry here in Kenya. You have heard it from him. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you for your time. We'll do this again on Thursday, same time, right here on KBC Channel 1. Until then, have a good time.